what we also found beyond that basic statistic that almost 1 in 3 children are poor is that if you're a child, you're much more likely to be poor in Ghana than if you're an adult. It's also very important for the future of the country as a whole. If a child is poor, then they grow up to be a poor teenager, they grow up to be a poor adult, they do less well in school, they're less healthy, they do less well at finding a job and earning an income. So it just perpetuates, if you like, that cycle of poverty.
People would naturally say that children are not supposed to work, children do not have the opportunities of earning money on their own, so it's only natural that they are poorer than adults. So why is it necessarily special that this report is now pointing out that children are more likely to be poorer than adults?
I mean, the analysis doesn't consider whether a child works or not. We would assume that a child should not be working, but in actual fact, they often are. Ghana has one of the highest levels of child work out of any country in the world. So a lot of children are actually contributing to the income of their household, whereas they should actually be at school, or they should be at home playing or growing up with their family. So I think this is important because we're finding that children are becoming increasingly concentrated in poor households. So government needs to target its support to those households and those areas of the country which are more poor, because poverty and deprivation is becoming concentrated in smaller areas. And what we're seeing when you look at a map of the country is that there are some districts or some communities that are doing pretty well. They're advancing, they have health and education services in place, people are getting access, but there might be a district right next door to that one that's doing well, which is doing very, very poorly. And it is those districts and those communities that we need to focus on and to provide them more targeted support. And at the moment, that's not really the case. Pretty much every district gets a very similar amount of money from central government to deliver on its obligations, whereas there are some which are doing so much worse. They're really facing major challenges which need to be tackled.
Why is this report so important, and why do you think there should be action from duty bearers and government?
I think it's important to say that Ghana has made a lot of progress. Remember the Millennium Development Goals, right? The first Millennium Development Goal target is about halving poverty, and the deadline was to do that by 2015. And the data from GSS tells that Ghana actually did that. And very few countries in the world did this. Very few countries in Africa managed to halve poverty. But Ghana did it, and it did it slightly ahead of the deadline. So we should certainly recognize that Ghana has done very, very well. But what we found in our analysis is that the progress has been slowing down dramatically. Progress in getting people out of poverty is much slower now than it used to be. But also, we know it has this knock-on impact for the growth of the country. We can't expect Ghana to continue to develop unless we have deliberate, specific policies in place to include everybody. So at the moment, if you still have almost 1 in 3 children living in poverty, it means they're not part of the country's development, and they won't be in the future. So we can't have this inclusive development that Ghana really needs. So this is something that the government know they need to look at, and I understand that it's something that they're working towards at the moment, which is very important. Well, one key issue that we've identified is that inequality in Ghana is now at its highest level ever. So this basically means the gap between the people that have and the people that have not is getting larger and larger every day. It's at its highest level ever. And this is important for those people who are left behind, but it's also important for the development of the country as a whole. So we need to make specific policy choices to make sure that these people are not left behind. But as I said, the government seems to recognize this. A lot of other actors seem to be recognizing this, and discussions have started to change. Even this year in May, the National Development Planning Commission held a very large discussion, a dialogue with a number of key ministries, including the Ministry of Gender, Children and Social Protection, but also the Ministry of Finance, so where the money is, and also the Ministry of Agriculture, where a lot of the poor people are living. And they came together with well over 300 people to discuss this issue and to agree specific actions which need to be undertaken to address it. So we now have this national agreement at the highest level in government and civil society and media that something needs to be done about inequality. And we also have this list of very specific policy actions that need to be implemented. And these cover all kinds of different areas, like improving access to quality services, but expanding social protection, making agriculture more productive. There's a long list of things, but now we need to move toward the implementation. And sometimes it's difficult to have these discussions just before a presidential election, but I'm sure people will maintain the momentum and we can keep moving towards the objective.